Muito bem, então vamos dar início ao nosso webinar, hoje dedicado à redução dos plásticos e muito dirigido para os operadores turísticos. Já temos connosco as nossas oradoras, que já apresentarei. Não podendo contar, lamentavelmente, com a representante também do Turismo de Portugal, a Leonor Picão, para as boas-vindas, mas, enfim, ela incumbiu-me de fazer essa apresentação, dar-vos as boas-vindas a todos, agradecer a vossa presença e também explicar o enquadramento deste webinar. Ele faz parte de um ciclo de webinars que decorre de um projeto que o Turismo de Portugal, com vários parceiros, apresentou ao Fundo Ambiental, portanto é um projeto financiado pelo Fundo Ambiental e é um projeto que tem diversas ações. É denominado Turismo Sustentável, um melhor futuro para e com todos. Tem um conjunto de ações que vão desde a restauração circular e sustentável à economia circular no alojamento turístico, às questões da neutralidade carbónica e da construção sustentável nos empreendimentos turísticos, eficiência hídrica nos campos de golfe em Portugal e a redução do plástico também no turismo, tanto no alojamento turístico como nos operadores turísticos, e este projeto tem como outputs um conjunto de ferramentas de apoio aos empresários nestas matérias que vos referi, ferramentas que vão estar disponíveis até ao final do mês de março no portal do Turismo de Portugal. E nesta fase de preparação destes documentos finais, estamos a desenvolver este ciclo de webinars. No caso da restauração e da economia circular no alojamento, com um dos parceiros, a Aresp. No caso da neutralidade carbónica e da construção sustentável, com a Universidade Nova de Lisboa. No caso da eficiência hídrica nos campos de golfe, com a Federação Portuguesa de Golfe e com o CNIG, e no caso da redução do plástico, tanto no alojamento como nos operadores turísticos, com a Travel Without Plastic. Portanto, são os nossos parceiros neste projeto. Este projeto, enfim, como já perceberam, está completamente focado na temática da sustentabilidade. Ele é, aliás, ele está, aliás, contemplado no plano Turismo Mais Sustentável 2023, que o Turismo de Portugal lançou recentemente, que já esteve em consulta pública e que estamos neste momento a tratar os contributos recebidos para poder ser lançada a versão atualizada do plano. E, obviamente, enfim, todas estas matérias estão alinhadas, enfim, não só com aquilo que a nossa estratégia Turismo 2027 já apontava, mas também com aquilo que são as perspectivas de posicionamento do setor nesta fase, neste período de retoma e de saída de uns tempos tão difíceis como são estes que temos vivido. E, de facto, a dimensão da sustentabilidade, esta diferenciação da nossa oferta através do respeito pelo planeta, pelo ambiente, pelas comunidades onde o setor e as empresas têm os seus negócios desenvolvidos, é efetivamente um caminho incontornável que temos que seguir. E para isso temos que estar munidos de informação, de ferramentas, de também apoios, para que as empresas possam prosseguir esse caminho. Hoje vamos dedicar a nossa tarde de trabalho, esperamos que não mais do que 1h30, para também não vos tomar muito tempo, vamos dedicar ao impacto dos plásticos de uso único nas empresas e nos destinos turísticos, aqui com um foco nos operadores. Teremos para a semana webinars dedicados ao mesmo tema, mas para o alojamento turístico, e temos connosco a Jo Hendrick, que é a fundadora da Travel Without Plastic. A Jo explicará a sua associação e o trabalho que têm desenvolvido no âmbito desta temática da redução do plástico no turismo, e também tem consigo a Anula Galewska, que trabalhou com a Travel Without Plastic neste guia específico para os operadores turísticos, e portanto vamos perceber com estas duas oradoras o impacto do plástico na atividade e como podemos reduzir e criar alternativas ao uso do plástico de uso único. Eu queria agradecer a sua presença. So, Jo and Anula, thank you very much for being with us. We just explain how and why we are doing this project that has a lot of partners, and you are one of these important partners that are working with us in this specific thematic so important regarding sustainability. And I already said that we will launch a tool, a guide specific for tour operators regarding reducing plastic of unique use. And I give you the word, so Jo will talk and after Anula will talk. I will ask everyone who is in this webinar, if you have questions, please, you can put them in the chat, and we will try at the end of the webinar to answer the questions that you have put here, either in Portuguese or in English. We will manage it. So Jo and Anula, thank you very much for being with us. Jo, I give you the word.
Great. Thank you very much, Teresa. I'll just wait for Anula to share the presentation there. Excellent, thank you. If you move on one slide for me, Anula, and I'll get started. So a very quick introduction to Travel Without Plastic. It was founded in 2017, based on many years of previously working in sustainable tourism and helping hotels and tour operators to reduce waste. Personally, I've worked on plastic reduction since 2011, but it was 2017 when this became a main focus and when Travel Without Plastic was created. Since then, we've worked with hotel chains and tour operators around the world to create a range of guidance documents and toolkits, and we've undertaken many webinars and workshops training hundreds of hospitality staff. So it's fantastic for us to be working with Turismo de Portugal on this project to adapt and translate a number of our tools so that they're relevant to the Portuguese context and can be made freely available to businesses. So this webinar is really designed to support those of you that are getting started or want to accelerate the changes in your tour operation businesses. So our agenda for today that Anula will cover in detail once I've done a short introduction to the impacts. We're going to look at those problems, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and then from a tour operating perspective, look at the circles of influence where you can make a difference, how to create a successful single-use plastic reduction strategy, and how to educate and engage both staff and the guests that are coming on holiday to the destination. So we always start our presentations with why we do the work that we do, and essentially it is quite simple, and that's because the world wasn't designed to digest plastic. It just doesn't decompose in the same way as organic products do, and if it's disposed of irresponsibly or finds its way into natural environments, it will do one of two things, and that's either remain intact for years, sometimes centuries, or it will break up into tiny toxic microplastic particles that we already see are touching many parts of the world today. And plastic it's bad news for environments and for wildlife, as I'm sure many of you are aware already. Many marine mammals and birds mistake plastic for food. We've probably all seen enough quite shocking images, so we don't need to go into those details here. But some of the lesser known impacts from microplastic particles that make their way into our food chain as human beings through fish and seafood, through bottled water, and even through the air that we breathe. And a study that was done just over a year or so ago now in Australia estimated that as humans we could be ingesting the same amount of plastic as the size of a credit card every single week, and the consequences to our health are not well documented. But I think most of us would agree that we would prefer not to be ingesting microplastics. And as our businesses are involved in tourism, if we're using single-use plastic products, then we have to accept that many of these can potentially end up in natural environments, even if they're disposed of correctly. And that's because plastic is so lightweight that it can easily blow out of waste bins, out of waste collection trucks, and even out of management facilities, and particularly when those are situated in coastal areas. Now, much of the Portuguese coastline is Atlantic facing, but the problem of plastic may not be so visible there on beaches or marine excursions, but the Mediterranean does give us a good example to demonstrate how tourism can contribute quite significantly to the issue of plastic pollution. And some research undertaken a couple of years ago by WWF showed that because of tourism, plastic pollution increased 40% in the summer months. That's domestic and international tourism. And it can be easy for us to think that our one business alone maybe can't make such a big difference. But when you see an image like this and you look at all of the potential businesses in tourism and the thousands of them all over the world that are all using single-use plastic, then even the smallest steps that we take can make a difference. Last week, whilst we were preparing for the webinar, I went on to TripAdvisor and I put Portugal as the destination, and then I searched for the word plastic to see what came up in the results. And I think it's really interesting to see that in actual TripAdvisor titles now, in the review title, we're actually seeing words like cut down on plastic. And I think, you know, maybe 5 years ago, this isn't something that we would have seen, but it really shows to us that the customer sentiment around this is changing. What was really nice, though, from Portugal on the next slide is I also found some very positive reviews, which was actually really lovely to see. And it shows that it's worth putting the effort in now in order to future-proof our businesses and our destinations. So despite the really very extremely challenging circumstances we all find ourselves in right now, I think it is a good time to rethink business strategies and operations so that as tourism comes back to life, we see less of the negative impacts and poor reviews, and we see more of the comments, the positive comments like these that will encourage people to travel to your destination. So from the tour operating perspective, we work very closely with Anula, who will introduce herself now and present the strategies for reducing plastic in tour operations. Over to you, Anula.
Thank you, Jo. Hello, everyone. My name is Anula Galewska, and I've been working not as much as Jo with single-use plastics. I've been mainly working as a tour operator, as an excursion provider, and as a guide some years ago. So I quite well, I think, understand the position you are in right now. And for some time, I've been working as a responsible business manager for one of the brands of the Intrepid Group for urban adventures. And there we've been very strategically reducing single-use plastic. And we've proven this to be successful in many destinations, not everywhere, unfortunately. But together with Jo, we decided to share this experience and expand a little bit on the simple things that you can do. And recently, since like 1.5 years, I've been working on making sustainable tourism a little bit more easier for everyone, especially for companies that are small, and focusing on teaching companies how to implement sustainability strategies in a very, very simple steps. And here I want to share with you specifically what can you do in terms of single-use plastics. Of course, in the European Union, I'm right now sitting in Kyrgyzstan, speaking with you from Central Asia. The situation in European Union is much better than in other parts of the world because of the regulations. But still there are things we can work on. And let's see what are the things you can impact and what you need to start with. I divided into the 4 circles of influence. As an excursion provider, as a tour operator, first thing you can look at is your own office. Then I just divided, because in your office you can change things immediately, and it's all up to you what you can do. Then we have 2 circles which are related to tours. And if you are an excursion provider, a tour operator, you know very well that there are some parts of your tours that you organize by yourself. And then there are other parts of your tours when you need to contract someone else, like in a restaurant or a vendor at the market or a transportation company. So you have only some extent of influence. You can only influence the tours to some extent. And then there are things as a last circle of influence. These are the tourists and their behavior in the destination. So specifically, your office is the first step when you look at plastic reduction strategy, because if we cannot manage our own office, if we cannot reduce single-use plastics in our own ground, how could we then impact anyone else? So when you think about your office and think whether there are any plastic items in your office, in your admin office, during your sales desks. Sorry?
Please go on, Anula.
And then specifically also look at what your employees bring. And it's very important that you create a waste-free culture. So it's part of your employees also values, because then everyone else will be judging you by your employees. And if you cannot prove that you can reduce single-use plastic in your office, then it's difficult to influence anyone else. But if you manage first to remove every item from your office, then you can look at your operations and specifically at the tours that are operated by you. For example, if you go on a hike, then a part of the tour might be a picnic together with a tourist, and then all the elements for the picnic you buy by yourself. So you need to look at the elements that you have, and then you would have, let's say, also in the same hike, you would be visiting a vineyard or a restaurant, and then you would be already working with a supplier. So you need to look how you can engage the suppliers in this, let's say, on this level. And then finally, finally, also where you have an impact and how you can change people's behavior is the customers. And it's very important that not only customers behave well during the tour, but you can inspire them to make a change and behave more responsibly and eco-friendly even when you are not watching. So if you inspire and you explain the customers why not to use single-use plastic, then they will have an impact even after your excursions. So these were the 4 circles of influence, and now I'm going to share with you the 7-step single-use plastic reduction strategy. What I found out is that many companies, they might want to change everything at once, or they don't know what to start with. Maybe they have 5 different plastic elements on the tours, and they would like to change everything, that they are ready to buy, I don't know, reusable bottles straight away. And then they end up having some mess or miscommunication. So here are very simple 7 steps that if you follow them, you can be sure that your plastic reduction strategy will really work well. So the first thing you need to do is to simply list and identify all the single-use plastic products that you have in your office and in your tours. So what are the things you need to look at? The back office, the front office, and all the sales kiosks. Also team events. If you're meeting with your teams for a picnic, you're going somewhere outside for team building, whether you're using a single-use plastic or not. Then obviously everything that happens on the tours, excursions, activities, including attractions, food stops, shopping, everything. Also transfers. Sometimes when you contract a transportation company, then they additionally offer a bottle of water or some candies that are also packed in single-use plastic. So think about this. And also whether maybe you have pre or post-tour meetings with clients, especially, for example, if you are offering self-guided tours, then you have one moment of contact with customers, and then you might be giving them some gifts or other items that also contain single-use plastic. So think about these. And what are the most typical items that are used by excursion providers? This is obviously the bottled water, and honestly, I don't understand why it's still such a popular thing when we have drinkable tap water everywhere, and there are so many other solutions. So think about whether you're using bottled water anywhere. Then it's provisions for drinks like drinking cups, glasses, lids, or straws. Where are you using them? And then for food, whether you're maybe using some single-use cutleries or lunch boxes or food wrapping, especially if you offer market tours, maybe there are some forks that you are using or plates that you are using on a market or when you are hiking in nature. And then also think about some gifts and souvenirs. Sometimes we give for customers like a small gift as a chocolate bar or any other snack or something at the end of the tour or at the beginning of the tour or as a gift. So you can think about this as well. And also there are other items that might be part of your tour, like for example raincoats that are single-use or other personal hygiene items. So identify all these items that you're using in your office and during the tours. And then you need to set some priorities. So it doesn't make sense to really fight with this one food vendor that really wants to give you straws in your drinks if you only take tours there like once a quarter and you go there with a small group. It's better to focus on things where you really have a big influence and you have big volumes. So I would choose, first of all, where you have a control, and obviously start with your office and things you specifically you directly buy for your tours, and then focus on those suppliers that are willing to work with you and to whom you're bringing biggest volumes. So then you will have the biggest impact with the minimum effort.
Anula,
yeah?
can you speak a little bit slower?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Yes, sorry. Okay. And very important is that when you when you plan your strategy and when you plan your solutions, that you have the right mindset. Because very often we think, okay, single-use plastic is bad, so let's replace it with something else that would be, I don't know, made of wood or made of paper, like a straw. So we would be replacing all the single-use plastic and convincing all our restaurants and food vendors to buy paper straws. But do you really need a straw to drink everything? So first of all, think whether you really need it. Then maybe you can think about a different way of use, or arranging your service, so you don't really need this, or you can provide it otherwise. You can switch to reusable, like a straw, and then if you really need to use single-use plastic, then at least make sure that it ends up in a proper place, so it can be recycled and it's disposed of properly. And when you think about alternative solutions, obviously no one will force you to buy things or convince vendors to buy alternatives if they are much more expensive. So for example, if you have a small inclusion, like a small shot of something or a drink that costs, I don't know, €1, and then the cost of a not plastic cup would be half of the price, of course it will be difficult to convince the vendor to switch to a different drinking cup. So you need to look for alternative that will be affordable, that are available in your destination, because also from the environmental point of view, it doesn't really make sense to order things from another part of the world. So if there is something not available around you, maybe it simply doesn't make sense to order it from afar. I just had a conversation today about guys who are providing for a hotel toothbrushes. And because it's very common and obligatory actually in Central Asia to offer toothbrushes in the hotel, and they wanted to, they are buying them in their own city, and they are plastic, single-use plastic, and then they decided to buy wooden ones, but from China, which is very far away. So obviously that doesn't make environmental sense. So also when you're looking for solutions, think of solutions that are available and close to you. And also when you think about alternative solutions, you need to make sure that guides will like them, that your suppliers will like them, and will not really get much more work, and that these solutions will be also popular with customers. And this is one step that is really also, people forget to do this. And this is testing your solutions. So for example, when you offer food tours or hiking tours, and you would like to switch from single-use lunch boxes to reusable containers, and this container in the picture is actually taken from the tour, a food tour I took in Bangkok. So before buying all the reusable containers and trying to change everything at once, first test it on one tour, test it with one vendor, and test it with some customers to make sure that it's easy to wash, it's easy to handle, it's easy to carry. So it's very important that you test before investing money in any reusable items, or before you actually make some significant changes. So test your solution, get feedback from people, and then adjust your communication depending on the feedback you get. And then if you want to, your guides, for example, to carry reusable containers, and before they were just throwing things into the trash, it's very important that you provide them proper support, that you set clear expectations, and that you train them and engage them. So all the set of training and tools that can help people really to deliver the work that you expect them to do. This is also very important, especially from the guides or even suppliers. So sometimes it's good to have even a written contract with them, and make sure that they have a clear, they know what you're expecting them. And finally, you can implement the changes. And when we think about reducing single-use plastic, I always suggest to either start from one product. So you would have one tour, and then you would always change it in one specific tour. Or if you have in one region and then you work with some vendors, so you would be working with specific vendor on removing single-use plastic. And again, start with one area and then implement the change across all your products. And finally, you need to inform customers. So specifically, for example, you want to reduce and remove water in single-use plastic bottles, then you need to let them know that you are removing it from your tour inclusions, for example. So if you have it in your itinerary, you need to update the tour information. And also you need to inform customers if you'd like them, for example, to bring their reusable bottles with them on the tour. Otherwise, people might be disappointed, or that will cause some unnecessary misunderstanding and confusion. So this was the 7-step strategy. And now a few words about how to engage your staff and guides and suppliers. So very important for you to understand is that if we want to reduce single-use plastic or implement actually any change in our companies, continuity is a key to success. So if you want to eliminate unnecessary waste, you need to think about how you can communicate it on and on. And I read that in order for people to really understand a new information and act on it, they need to hear it for 16 times. So when you say something just one time, then people will not do it. So you need to be creative in how you would be communicating with staff, guides, and suppliers, and using different arguments and being really creative in engaging them. So don't get disappointed when things don't work well straight away. Sometimes you need to invest your time and really be creative to engage different groups. So in order to engage staff, I am more than sure that in your teams, you already have people who are really, really eco-friendly and really believe that we need to reduce single-use plastic. They have this zero waste mindset, and that they will be really willing to help you. So you can simply, first of all, see who are the like-minded people who will help you drive the change. So then you can engage them in organizing different trainings, and you can let them speak on your behalf. If you have a bigger team, if you're just a few of you, just start discussing these things on general staff meetings. Also included in your job training. So specifically for example, when we have people responsible for product development, they really need to also understand what are the alternatives. They need to know how to speak with suppliers, and they will need some additional training. And then what is also very useful and helpful is if you have some specific performance indicators. So for example, again, if we work with let's say office manager, if you have someone who is responsible for the office, then they can have a specific indicator that by the end of the year you would reduce absolutely all the single-use plastic items. Or if you have a person responsible for product development, again, this person can have some specific targets related to reducing single-use plastic on specific routes or with specific suppliers. What also works well, and not only for plastic, but in general, about sustainability and specific values, that is signing an employee code of conduct. A code of conduct is a set of values related to business ethics, related to human rights, related to community relations, and also environmental management, that if you ask your employees to sign, then it will be like a formal commitment to your journey towards reducing single-use plastic and becoming becoming more sustainable as a company. And last but not least, extremely important part is about rewards and recognition. Maybe you can come up with some sort of competition for your staff members, for the most, the greenest employee, or other ways to reward those people who are really supporting you on your green journey. Another group, and probably the most important group of people that you need to engage, are the guides. The guides are, as you probably know, or you're also, if you're working yourself as a guide, that's easier. But if you have guides who are, for example, freelancers, and then they work for many companies in parallel, then it will be very difficult to engage them and ask them to do more than they usually do. So first of all, it's easier to engage guides if they really know why they are doing it, and if you make them care about these issues. So instead of telling them, oh, you should do this or the other thing, it's better to ask them about how they see the communities, how they feel about microplastics. Do they see any impacts on the environment that are caused by single-use plastics? And if they realize the problem, then you will not have to convince them to do anything. If they realize the problem, they will try to solve it themselves. So first of all, you need to engage them on their value basis. And then you can come up with different activities that are fun. So guides are usually very outgoing. So one of the examples that Urban Adventures in Havana did was creating a competition for the guides that they were posting on social media, that they are reducing and saying no to straws. And they've been doing some social media campaigns together with the guests and suppliers. And it was a fun activity for the guide. And then also at the end of this activity, for the guide that was most successful and convinced the many suppliers to absolutely get rid of straws in their bars, then they got a very cool prize. In this case, it was a financial prize. But then you can think of other incentives that would convince guides to do some extra work for you, because it's very difficult to convince them to do an extra work. But the guides are really the brand ambassadors of your company. They are the brand ambassadors also of your region. So their role is crucial in making the change. And also, especially if you work mainly with suppliers and you do not really own many things yourself, or you don't buy directly things yourself, you're mainly arranging routes, then the key is to engage suppliers. And suppliers are the difficult part to engage because they are looking, first of all, at the cost, especially, for example, if you are organizing wine tours and then you bring them big groups of people, and then they have only 10, let's say, glasses of wine, a proper glass. And then if you bring them a bigger group, then they would be using single-use cups. And it's more difficult for them to arrange everything. Maybe they don't have a dishwasher, maybe they don't want to invest money. So really working with suppliers is something that you need to invest some time in it, and you need to be patient. But definitely, at least when you're looking for new suppliers, you can already search for those suppliers who don't use plastic at all, and make it clear from the very beginning, when you're signing a new contract or you're agreeing that you're going to be bringing groups to them, that you expect them not to use any single-use plastic. And what helps here are some standards or some code of conduct as well. What I also recommend always to do is to have a supplier code of conduct. And I don't know, maybe if you are a bigger tour operator, then you can even have formal contracts with them when you would be outlining that you don't want them to provide any single-use plastic items. And then again, it's good to engage your suppliers through training or some activities. If you're organized for them, some meetings for your suppliers, for your partners, then you can also bring up this topic. It doesn't necessarily have to be only about plastic. It can be general, talking about sustainability, about being a responsible restaurant, about also talking about food waste and waste in general, because it's an important issue. So you can use different ways of communication, and also simply start talking with them about single-use plastic and waste, so they would open their minds. And sometimes they need specific instructions. So for example, you can give them the names of the brands that you know that exist as for alternatives. You can help them and find where to buy things. Maybe you can give them also some tips about the pricing, what is available on the market. And maybe if you know that you're working with several suppliers in one area and they all need some plastic alternatives, single-use plastic alternatives, maybe you can arrange and buy everything for them in bulk, or help them arrange buying in bulk. So this would be cheaper. So these are the things that you can do, and you can take the responsibility of influencing suppliers and helping them make the change. And finally, we have the communication with guests. And again, communication with guests is not necessarily specifically to plastic, but generally making them support your journey towards sustainability and being more green, and also making sure that they behave, let's say, more responsibly after your tour finishes. And when you think about communicating with guests, it's important to first understand who your guests are, and trying to understand what are their needs, why they are joining you. And then you can play with this profile and change your communication accordingly. So for example, if you have customers that are really into nature and they really love surfing, then you can easily talk about plastic in the context of the ocean, the marine life, the wildlife, the nature, and protecting the environment. If you are customers that are really into health, or they are really into luxury, then you can talk about plastic in the context that it looks cheap, that it's not really healthy to drink from a plastic bottle, and so on. So you can play with different from different angles, and you can adjust your communication depending on the profile of your customer. And then you need to communicate your zero plastic, zero single-use plastic, or zero waste strategy. So first of all, if you communicate it through your website, then there is a chance that you're going to be attracting customers who are really into reducing waste in general. Now there is a big movement of people who are going zero waste, and still there are not that many tour operators who are actually saying openly that they are absolutely zero waste. And right now, I just brought an example of this company here, that Oregon and Natural Habitat Adventures, and they were proud to announce that in 2019 they've been organizing the world's first zero waste adventure. They had WWF as a supporter, and there was some media campaign around it. Also on responsibletravel.com there is a dedicated section for zero plastic tours. So also, if you are, for example, if you want to offer your tours, you can look at responsibletravel.com, maybe you work with them, and then you would appear in this section. Basically, you can use already now having zero waste and zero single-use plastic as a marketing tool to attract a particular type of a customer. And also, when informing customers about zero plastic is important to set proper expectations. situations, especially if you're offering tours in nature and you would expect customers to bring their own reusable bottles, or if you expect them to bring their own cutlery, or maybe lunch boxes even, right? So you need to inform them before the tour on the itinerary, on the tour page, and then send them additional information how to prepare for the tour. So you make sure that there is no miscommunication and they come prepared for the tour. And then during the tour, remember that you have one chance to make the first impression. So if you're bringing your tourists first, you're meeting in your office or whatever the meeting point is, the restaurant or anything else, make sure that this specific place doesn't have any single-use plastic items. Also whether the guide, for example, is bringing their plastic bottle with them. Once we had a very negative feedback from a customer because the whole company is about sustainability, We had, as Intrepid, very strong brand. And in the tour itself, there were absolutely no single-use plastic items. However, during the break, the guide went to the shop and bought a plastic bottle for herself. And then the customer perceived it as a lack of integrity. And they really wrote a terrible review for the company because of the lack of integrity. So make sure that there is absolutely full integrity and one message sent, especially at the beginning of the tour. And then during the tour, if you're having customers from countries that are not so environmentally aware, for example, from Southeast Asia or Asia in general, where the topic of plastic is not so developed, it's very important that you explain them why you're not offering single-use plastic, because they might say that it creates some discomfort for them. So if you explain why you're doing it, it's because you care for your own community, then they will understand you better, and then they will join you in this journey. Because if you again tell them just not to do it, or you just don't use plastic because this is good for you, that's it, then they will not understand. So it's very important that you have a story to tell, and then you can engage them in your story. And again, depending on your customer profile, you can use different stories. And then if you want customers to reduce single-use plastic, or at least to dispose of plastic properly, they need to explain them how to do it. So give them instructions, especially if you're in the areas where you do not have waste separation. Give them clear instructions, for example, whether the water is drinkable, if not, where they can get the water, where you have water fountains, which are the zero waste shops and the cafes, or where they can dispose of waste properly. So give them very clear instructions. And even maybe if you want to take an additional step, not only to minimize the negative impacts, but do something more, maybe you can engage them and encourage them to support one of the environmental initiatives. And maybe they can donate some money, or maybe they can join some project that you are also passionate about. And also at the end of the tour, if you made your customers to make some changes in their behavior, maybe they felt some sort of discomfort because people might be used to having single-use cups in their hands, and now you're asking them to use reusable and a bottle that they have to carry all the way, or some other things. Make sure that you acknowledge their efforts, especially if this was something new for them, and make sure that you get their feedback as well, and collect if this was something okay or not, so you can improve your communication, also all your processes. And I think that for European customers, getting rid of single-use plastic is more natural. When we are working with customers from other regions, then we really need to work on the communication, explaining the why and acknowledging their efforts, so they will feel also encouraged to continue and to remove and eliminate single-use plastic from their everyday life. Yes, and more about specific solutions. Now we've just shared with you a general strategy, and more about specific solutions. How to get rid of bottles, water bottles. What kind of alternatives you can use for drinks, food, other items, and also specific solutions for city sightseeing tours, for nature and active tours, for boat tours, for food, wine, and market tours, and also for food guided tours, self-guided tours. You will find in the guide that is being prepared by now by the great Turismo Portugal, and it will be launched very soon. So I hope you got something from this presentation, and I'm really sorry for speaking so fast. I was just afraid that I will not be able to tell you everything that I wanted.
Thank you, Anula, for guiding us in all these steps towards reducing single plastic use. I will let you rest a little bit, and I will ask Joe. Joe, I don't know if you already see this question that we have already here in the chat.
About the bottled water.
Yes, and I would also ask you, because Anula talked about it, I would ask you if really choosing the right alternative is quite an important challenge for tour operators and for companies in general. So don't use, if we want to reduce single-use plastic, and we really want to choose a right alternative, we have to be very careful about this choice.
Yes, I think if I first maybe answer the question about bottled water.
Can you put your camera on?
I see there. Oh, sorry, of course. Yes. Let me see. I forgot I'd switch that off. Sorry. For bottled water to customers on daily tours. So firstly, you know, these things aren't easy. They take some planning, and as Anula talked about, they can take a change in communication, so that people are aware that you're going to change how certain aspects of the tour are delivered. So depending on whether or not there are cafes or restaurants near to the start of the tour where guests could fill up their own water bottle, and then plan an itinerary where refill is constantly an opportunity throughout the tour. So of course that can't be done straight away, and you would need to engage with people throughout that tour and look at the geographical areas that you're visiting to see if that's a possibility for you. But also to look at how water is provided maybe at a sit-down stop. So can you go into a cafe or a restaurant instead of needing to have water on the go? Sorry for my dogs in the background. So looking at all of those different opportunities, where exactly does your itinerary go, and who can you engage with to be able to have access to water throughout that itinerary? In terms of alternatives and the importance of alternatives, bear with me 1 second, then obviously no alternative would be the better solution if that's at all possible. So as Anula mentioned, when we look at easy items like straws, do we need to really replace a plastic straw with a paper straw? Some people may have the necessity for a straw, so it's always good to check that. But it's important that we get ourselves into the mindset of waste reduction, not just single-use plastic reduction, but waste reduction in general. Otherwise, our advice when looking at alternatives is to take the time to understand different reusable options, what they mean, how they need to be implemented. If you're looking at reusable Lunch boxes, for instance, how do you collect those in? Where do they get washed? How do you communicate the hygiene of those to customers so people feel reassured and safe to use them? So we need to look at how that is described in as for customers to feel safe about that. But if you have to continue to use single use for whatever reason, because it may be that that is the case, then to really think about the waste infrastructure and choose materials that are easily recyclable in the destination. And look for, if you have to use bottled water, for instance, and the plastic bottle is made from a high percentage of recycled plastic content. And then, as Anula said, you enable people to be able to dispose of those single-use items in a responsible way. And I think that the very last thing is to make sure that we prevent any single-use items from becoming litter and from becoming pollution. So even if the only thing you can do at the moment is that, then that's still a really great step to take. So really consider your own personalized circumstances and how your tours work for you and what the infrastructure is that supports those tours.
If I maybe add only one thing to the challenges of looking for alternatives, is that sometimes we just don't realize that having, let's say, if we use bioplastics, or we call them paper cups for coffee, and actually it's mixed materials, and they are even worse because it's really impossible to recycle them. So it's sometimes things that we perceive as more eco-friendly, they are actually not. So really understanding what is what and how it can be disposed and what can be done with it is very, very important.
Yes, and all these issues that you also mentioned, to communicate with tourists, to pass the message, to let them realize how important is their own behavior. Is this also a challenge? I mean, we are doing these efforts on the side of the business of the companies, but there is also the challenge of the client, of the tourists. And
actually, what I would say is that I've seen more positive reactions than negative. Like people, our companies, our partners were always afraid whether we should get rid of, let's say, plastic bottles, because they were as inclusions by default included in tours, and whether would customers think that we're just trying to save money on them and something like this. No, it was the opposite. No one ever said that, oh my God, you didn't give me a plastic bottle. People are more enthusiastic about companies that are waste-free or single-use plastic-free. I mean, but it also very much depends on the country of origin of the customer. And as I said, depending on the region, some countries are not so much aware of environmental issues. But now I think if we are working with European customers, that it's much, much easier.
Yes. We have here a question which is not our focus, but we can even answer relying on your experience. And someone is asking, how can you manage in the African continent, for example, where potable water is a problem? Do you have any experience from your other partners regarding this issue? It's not a Portuguese issue, but anyway, it's an important stuff.
I don't really have experience with African countries as much as I have with Southeast Asia, and the problem of water, availability of water is pretty much the same. And also customers, when they go to Southeast Asia, they are afraid to drink water which is not in plastic bottles. So I think that there are solutions that you can simple solutions that you can apply everywhere, but there you need to work more on the communication of the customer, because you can also have a bottle that is not tap water, but you can use bigger containers, and then you can have filters for water, but this requires more communication to the customer and increasing their trust in your brand that you're providing safe water to them. So for example, in Asia, there were several tour operators that started collaborating together and building raising awareness about safety issues around water and what are the alternatives to single small bottle water bottles. So I think collaboration here and communication to customers is very important.
Mm-hmm. Joe, anything to add regarding experience in different destinations with different issues regarding these situations?
I think it's really about looking at what is available to you and doing the best that you can in the situation that you're in. So as Anula said, if you want to reduce the volume of plastic, so in some cases in West Africa, where I've worked before, water can be it can be purchased in really large gallon drums. So they're like 18 or 20 litres that are switched upside down, and they can be served quite easily from a minibus, from the back of a tour van, or from a coach, for instance. And that itself, because those bottles are often returned to suppliers and reused, they stay in a circular loop. So it's still plastic, but it still helps you to reduce plastic, and it helps to give that reassurance and confidence to your customers. I think it's all about looking at what is available to you and just going for the biggest volume possible, and then again being very responsible with what you do with the plastic waste if you have to generate it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and also this question that this issue that Anula also talk about the suppliers, about the partners that tourist companies have to work with, and it's also important that they also come to this process of sustainability and reduce plastic. And that can be a fragile item in all the process. So this is quite a challenge also for companies.
I think that for bigger, like if we have a stable volume of customers, then of course for bigger companies it's easier to influence vendors or like restaurants and our partners, simply because we can say we will not bring you customers anymore if, let's say, within 1 year you will not change your policies. If you are a tiny provider and we just bring a few people few times, I don't know, a month, then of course our possibilities are much smaller. So I would always start with just a conversation and bring up the topic in an informal way and start talking again about how it impacts our personal lives, how it impacts life of our kids and the future. So having informal conversation and connecting on a personal level with people, so then they would like to make the change, not because we are a tour operator and we are forcing something on them, but just because they also believe in it. So depending on the size, I would adjust the communication method.
Mm-hmm. Joe, can you add something about this?
I think that's really the key. It's to engage in a positive way and to not be seen to be forcing an opinion negatively, but to work together and to suggest how can we collaborate to do this. We want to bring our customers to your venue. Our customers don't want to see single-use plastic. How can we work together to avoid this? And also to take the time to stay abreast of new innovations and new products, because this is a very busy space. There's a lot going on when it comes to alternative services as well as alternative products, and it's worth always engaging maybe with zero waste shops, if there are any in the destination, to see how they could help, and perhaps looking to find suppliers and vendors that have the same ethics and the same values as you do, and over time to adjust your tours and your operations so they align with others that are also interested in sustainability.
Mm-hmm. And that's why it's also important to work with accommodation, and that's why we are also working with Travel Without Plastic with regarding reducing reducing plastic in accommodation, because they are really partners of tour operators.
I would say that the collaboration is key here between the tour operators, and then also when we, first of all, one thing that every tour operator can do is then to share the guide that Joe has written with their all accommodation partners. So to make sure that it goes to everyone that they work with is the first thing. And also a great example, again, from Asia, when two tour operators, which are absolutely big competitors, decided to work together and really force the sustainability among their suppliers, because many tour operators at the end of the day work with the same accommodations and with the same restaurants. So if you, as a tour operators, you collaborate together, then you have a stronger message on the suppliers, because then they will understand that this is something, a demand from not one company, but the whole mess. So collaboration is also a key.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so and regarding accommodation, we will talk next week with Joe with Travel Without Plastic, because we are working on a guide for accommodation. And here I have to say that we have the contribution, the technical contribution of the team of Portuguese Plastic Pact, because we are members of the Portuguese Pact, and we think that it will be also a very important tool for our partners in accommodation. And also in that guide there will be some examples and some inspiration also for tour operators, right, Joe?
Yes, that's right. For the webinars, really, we wanted to present the potential of strategies so that people could think differently about how to change their operations and the steps to take, because the guidance documents, both the one for tour operators and the one for accommodations, go into the detail of how to make the changes, of what to think about, of the pros and the cons of each of those decisions that you might take. So for people may have many questions about a specific type of plastic product and what to do with that, and hopefully they will be answered by the guidance documents, because that's where we've been able to put the detail. Say the webinars today are more the strategy, and all of the detail can be found once the guides are launched, hopefully towards the end of this month.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Anula. I don't have here any more questions. I don't know if perhaps everything is clear and everyone is already doing this path, which is very important, because Portugal really wants to make the difference and to be recognized by the international markets as a sustainable tourist destination, and it's key to have this compromise and this cooperation from our tour operators. So if any question is coming now, and if Anula and Joe, you don't have any further final message to our participants, I can finish the webinar. Yes, one last minute to make a question? No? Okay. Joe and Anula, nothing else to add? Just don't give up?
From my side to say thank you very much to everybody who stayed from the beginning to the end and listening to us in English. We're very sorry that we don't speak in Portuguese, and we wish we did. We very much appreciate you spending the time with us today, and we hope it has been of some inspiration, and it would be great to hear what people do as a result of this. But thank you for spending your time with us today.
We have here a final and difficult question. Can you share the most creative idea to replace plastic use?
I think that a very simple idea for food tours, this is, instead of using plastic items for food tasting, you can use raw pasta. That is absolutely also biodegradable. So that was my very easy solution and very cheap solution. Thank you so much for the invitation. I hope it's not the last time we see each other, and I hope that Portugal will be this country that is recognized for their efforts on sustainability, which already is. So thank you so much for the invitation.
Yes, thank you so much, Joe and Anula. Aos nossos participantes portugueses, muito obrigado pela vossa presença. Esperamos que tenha sido um webinar inspirador, ou enfim, que vos ajude a colocar também, enfim, creio que muitos já terão este tema na vossa agenda, na retoma da atividade que tanto queremos e que tanto desejamos. O guia vai estar, como vos disse, disponível no site do Turismo de Portugal até ao final do mês. Nós depois faremos essa divulgação para vosso conhecimento e, enfim, manteremos o contacto com Travel Without Plastic para, enfim, continuarmos com contributos, com capacitação complementar que venha a ser necessária e alinhada com as vossas necessidades. Muito obrigado a todos, espero que fiquem bem e até breve. Muito obrigado.